Okay, welcome back to this episode of Three Ball Math Guys, threeballmathguys.com. What it is that we have today with our episode is we sometimes, as math professors, sometimes we have a bad day in the classroom. And because of this, we are going to be having a press conference for each and every one of us. Myself, Professor Detson, Professor Jordan, and we've had a bad day in the math classroom, and sometimes that happens, and we're going to talk about that today. So we've got our reporter, Brooklyn, and she's going to be asking us some questions based upon our very poor math teaching for today. And obviously, things that we can do to be able to make up for bad teaching is we can look good, and we look good all the time because of these shirts. So that's what it is that we've got. And again, hopefully our next time that we happen to teach will be really, really good, and we don't have to have these press conferences anymore. So that's what we've got going on, our press conference for this episode of Three Bald Math Guys. So again, welcome back. We've had this very poor day of teaching today, and now we've got our press conference, and here we go.
Good morning, everyone. Please welcome Professor Rob to the podium.
Yeah, thank you for your patience this morning. It's been a really, really challenging day right from the get-go.
Rumor has it that things didn't go well in geometry this morning.
Yeah, the students were in fine form today. It was kind of one of those things where I always start a class asking, class, how are you today? Welcome to college geometry. And of course, you have a student that says, hey, Professor Rob, if you're a tree, why can't I be a tree? Because when you say geometry, why can't I be a tree? So yeah, funny. Yeah, that's a really good joke. Hearing that question, I really just had to ignore it.
It's been rumored that the next question asked of you was, is the reflective surface atop of your head classified as convex or concave?
Yeah, convex, concave. Of course, we know that convex, of course, is outer. Convex, it basically goes in. So, of course, the answer to that is convex. Convex, because just like knowledge and just like the reflection off the top of my head, what that does there, it exudes all rays going outward, and so thus it is convex. You can tell I'm just a little bit upset here this morning. Yeah, so with that morning sun, so the reflection comes in off the sun, or comes in through the windows and reflects off my head and then goes in another direction. Again, those students that were in the front row, man, they didn't have enough sunglasses to be able to make sure that they could be able to see just because of that reflection that was going on. Because we all know the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. So it's just like that movie, what's it called? I think it's called Cars, where you have Lightning McQueen. Again, he's flashing his lightning signal, his lightning sign, just like the reflection off the top of my head. Ka-chow.
Yeah, I have that right here around 8:17 a.m. during an exercise involving similar triangles. You wrote, if 3x equals 12, therefore x equals 3.
3x equals 12, therefore x equals 3. That's right, isn't it? That's right. Yeah, I'm looking at my stats here today, and it looks like, yeah, you know that's not right. It's not 3x equals 12, x equals 3. Oh my goodness, it's not. X equals 4. because of that, it was like the conic section revolt from the late 1800s. It was kind of one of those things where reference to the shape of my head really came out from left and right field, just like a 3-0 fastball right down the middle. It was, hey, what about that sphere that's above your neckline? And what about that hemisphere that's above your ears? Why don't you use that? It's kind of one of those things where, again, just the students are saying this, that, and the other stuff, and I just couldn't move out of the way.
We heard statements down the halls such as, nice sphere, of course referring to the shape of your head. It's too bad you're not using your northern hemisphere. Another statement was, how about that cone above your ears? It looks like a dunce cap. What is your response to these remarks?
You know what? I get it. When we do the algebra, so 3x equals 12, x doesn't equal 3. Of course, x equals 4. That's right. So there's no going back on that one, of course. But because of the mistake, the embarrassment just really probably caused my head to illuminate probably X equals 4 times as much. So yeah, that's one of those things that you just kind of have to live with, but the damage was done. So it was difficult to really get back on track with regard to that. I really had to kind of focus on my inner Euclid to be able to make sure that we were moving on in the class.
What did you do?
Well, what we did is we moved on to angles. Angles, of course, it's a little bit easier to go ahead and talk about that. When you have an acute angle, it's really easy to make some jokes about acute angles. Oh, that's a cute angle, just like you talk about a baby. Oh, that's a cute baby, just like your angles. Oh, acute angle, those types of things. You can talk about the right angles or wrong angles. That's another thing. And then the other thing that we have is we have obtuse angles. So there are obviously some chuckles that were there. And there was this one student in the front. His name was Andy. And I was saying, what, you think I'm being obtuse? And I just turned my head like this. And I sent him to the dean. Take that, Shawshank.
How did your class end?
We know that's with this happening. It was almost 9 o'clock, and so I asked the students, well, what type of angle is created with the 2 hands of the clock when we get close to 9 o'clock? And so then one student says, "Hey, a right angle, professor. Touche, success." The students actually did learn something there. And then lastly, we described something about the abbreviations that we use that we have for determining triangle congruency. That's stuff that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And so what it is that we talked about side, 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 and we use the abbreviation SSS for side, side, side. And then we moved into side angle side. That was the next one. So side angle side is SAS. And then, of course, the students were asking, "Hey, Professor Rob, what about angle side, side? What about that abbreviation?" I had enough. End of class. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to take some time to start with an opening statement. Then I'll take some questions from the reporters in the order of operations. So, today I feel like we can't fault the students. They studied hard. I'm going to take full responsibility for the lack of preparation that led to today's class. Sometimes you just don't have your best stuff. And you have to kind of grind out a class period just on pure grit and determination. I think that's what we did here today. We just need to take the time to focus and get back to our fundamentals. Take this thing one class period at a time.
So what led to this lack of preparation that you're talking about?
Well, thanks for the question. First and foremost, thanks for the question. The trouble began about 15 minutes into the college algebra lesson. It all started kind of with a minor lack of focus when I took my eye off of the board. I was trying to solve this equation here. And I ended up with x equals 1. Oh, no. I thought in my head as soon as I wrote it, thought this has a chance to be a really long day. So giggles and panic kind of spread across the room, and I knew it as soon as I wrote it down that I had let the rat poison of the media get to my execution. I really have to focus on controlling the controllables because college algebra really is a class built off of inches.
Not to mention you didn't have a couple of your best students in the classroom today.
I'm not going to get into that with you guys here. There's always more to the story than gets reported. I just want to focus on the people who are here in our building. I'll let the advisors advise and the administrators administrate, and I'll do what they pay me to do, which is teach.
Sure, you're right. Back to the class period. You make your mistake, panic in the classroom. Did you feel like it was over after that point?
Not necessarily. I knew it would be an uphill climb, but nothing that we hadn't overcome before. It was a critical mistake. You really need to avoid those early turnovers in a lesson. Good opponents, they're going to take advantage of that, and that's what happened here today. To be honest with you, it actually got a little worse at that point. When I asked if a student could come up to the board and help correct my error, she just replied with, "I'm here so I don't get fined."
How did you respond to that comment?
Well, it caught me pretty off guard, if we're being honest. I've always been taught to never underestimate your opponent. Obviously, I did that today, but again, you got to give all the credit to them. They earned it today. Our backs, at that point, they were against the wall, and we had to dig ourselves out of this hole that we put ourselves in. You know, it was really a lot better class than the final instructor review would indicate, but that's kind of reading between the lines.
So how do you bounce back next week?
If I just look at our stats here, we've got a long ways to go. But we haven't been eliminated from anything. Our goals are all still out in front of us. They're all still achievable. We have to shut out the outside noise and get back to what we do. And that's taking class one class at a time, focusing on the fundamentals, and just letting the grade book take care of itself.
So where do you go from here?
You know, we need to take a long look in the mirror at who we are and decide who we want to be as a group. We have a big week coming up next week against a really scrappy polynomial group. Can't overlook them. You know, but as the media does, we're already starting to hype up the lesson from 2 weeks from now, which is when we're going to take on our big rival quadratics.
Professor Jordan, do you really think you have a chance to get this group to finals?
Finals? We're talking about finals? We can't even make it through a class error free right now. Finals? What are we talking about? Finals?
Fine, okay. Just tell us what you think of that big parabola the quadratics got out of the portal. Seems like his vertex has been globally maximized this semester.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop you right there. There's a big misconception on that parabola. A lot of people don't know this, but he started his career as a quadratic. Some might say that he hit a limit and flattened out, but we all know that his heart is where it should be with the quadratics. You know, but listen, I'm done answering questions about the quadratics. We can't overlook our lesson next week, which is polynomials. So we are on to polynomials.
But what about the quadratic formula? That offensive scheme is unstoppable.
Irrational, maybe. Imaginary, sometimes. But like I said, we're on to polynomials.
The quadratics complete the square at the highest rate in the league.
Listen, we're on to polynomials. I'm done with this.
Good morning, Professor Detson. Please tell us what happened in class today.
Well, today's lesson was we were working with probability and probability distributions. So I was getting down to the last of the probability axioms, and a student asked, "Hey, professor, what's with these letters and symbols and formulas? Why can't we just play cards and roll dice and have fun?" Well, I kind of just jumped over that question and ignored it. And because they wanted to have fun, I said, hey, let's visit one of my favorite topics, the fundamental principle of counting, emphasizing that fun. And so, you know, I started talking about the number of outfits that you can have, especially for me, you know, just from a few shirts, few pairs of pants, and for me, my sweater vests. My students know I love my sweater vests. But before I can even finish and tell them how many I can have with just that many sweater vests, shirts, and pants, I have a student blurt out, "Hey, professor, this is not fun. Are you sure you're not demental?"
How did you react to that disrespectful comment?
Well, you know, I just laughed it off. You know, I didn't want them to let them know that they were actually getting to me, but I'm telling you, you know, it did kind of get to me a little bit. Things continued to go downhill from there, really, kind of like the right side of the chi-square distribution. And speaking of distributions, now that we're on it, it was a lesson for probability and probability distributions. So I said, okay, let's introduce the normal distribution. This distribution is very prevalent in what we do with data. So let's talk about that. More specifically, the standard normal distribution. The standard normal distribution has a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. It is centered at 0, and the summation of the area under the curve is equal to 1.
Is it true that a student asked about the curve over your bald head and that it looked like a 0 under the curve?
Yes, they certainly did. At the time in class, I really didn't know how to react to that. But now, I mean, thinking back at it, how could I really be upset about that? They actually remembered that the standard normal curve is centered at 0. So, if anything, they just referenced my bald head as being 0. But by golly, that is a great use of the substitution property.
Where did you go from there?
So the way things were going in class at this point in time, in my head, I was doing the conditional probability of having a successful class period. So what's the probability of having a successful class given, so we're conditioning on the behavior of my students and their attention span at this point in time. Well, that was probably one of the easiest things I did in that class period. It was 0. It's an impossible event. But if I told my students that, they would have said 0, more like your bald head. So I was like, okay, I'm done. I cannot move on with this. So I said, you know what? We'll end class and we'll try again next time, hopefully with a higher probability of success. Thank you. That's all I got for you.
Thank you, Professor Dutson.
And thank you again for watching this episode of Three Bald Math Guys. If you wouldn't mind clicking on the like and subscribe buttons, so that way we can find out how much that you might like our content. Again, take a look at our website and provide anything that you want for us in terms of content and things like that at threebaldmathguys.com. Again, we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thanks again.